Hey everybody, the Super Vader 400 here, Douglas Blair Roberts, the brown skinned human here, back for another video. And this time, this is a remake of a video I already did on my channel and will be sending you in the future along with this video. And this is a remake of my favorite and best cartoons list. Instead, this review will have all of my best cartoons list. It won't be as long as the previous list because as much as I love the previous video, it was a cluster. It was something of a clusterfuck. There were various stopping errors which I warned you about when I send you that video. So I'm gonna do a much clearer one this time. This video pretty much will be the same as the last one, only it'll be much shorter, and it will have vastly different music. As always, when it comes to favorite cartoons, my favorite genres are action, adventure, sci-fi, fantasy. Those are my favorite genres, but I also enjoy comedy, adventure, and animation sitcom. These animation sitcom and horror. These are my all-time favorite genres when it comes to cartoons. As you know, some of my all-time favorite animated series are, you'll see them again in this list too, the video game-based cartoons of the 90s, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Double Dragon, Sonic the Hedgehog, Mega Man, Darkstalkers, etc. Then you got the Marvel and DC series of cartoons and various other sci-fi, action, adventure-based cartoons. The cult classic Ben 10, so many more. From the comedy era, you got the Smurfs, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Fantastic Max. What else? What else? The cartoons, various Nicktoons, and the shows of today like Loud House, Uncle Grandpa, Craig of the Creek, and so many more in this awesome list. So yeah, I'll also be mentioning cartoons that I forgot. There was one big series of cartoons. I'm not going to name it here, but there was one big series of cartoons that aired in the 90s. They're iconic. So that's a hint right there. But I can't believe I forgot them when I was doing the previous favorite cartoons list. So with that being said, Doug's best and favorite cartoons list is coming right now. It's time to hit my music. I do not care what anyone thinks because it doesn't matter. My opinion is the only one that matters.
Don't ask me why, I don't need a reason. I got my way, my own way. It doesn't matter now what happens. I will never give up the fight. Long as the voice inside drives me to run and fight. It doesn't matter who is wrong and who is right.
Hey everyone, it's time for part 2 of my favorite, or should I say best, Doug's best and favorite cartoons list. And number 1, as you can see by the picture here, I'm starting off with the 90s and 2000s Warner Brothers variety cartoons, which of course consists of Freakazoid, Tiny Toons, Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, the Tasmania Show, the Looney Tunes Show, and Wabbit, also called the New Looney Tunes Show as of 2018. These shows right here, like I've said in previous videos where I have talked about the Looney Tunes, I'm a huge fan of the Looney Tune characters and the animators who gave them life, but I was never really that much of a super fan of the Looney Tunes as a franchise, so I actually enjoy most of their modern adaptations much more than other people do, than I do the old stuff. And all of these cartoons were great, with Freakazoid, Tiny Toons, the Pinky and the Brain, and the Looney Tunes and Wabbit Show, in my opinion, being the best. Of course, the most popular and the two most popular shows and most notable on here were, of course, the three most popular shows were Tiny Toons, Pinky and the Brain, and Animaniacs. But I thought Freakazoid, Tiny Toons, and Pinky and the Brain, and the Looney Tunes Show and Wabbit were the best of these shows. Like I said, all of these shows were great. All of these shows were great. All of these shows were for the most part similar, with only Freakazoid being the one that stood out the most, because Freakazoid, unlike the other shows on this list, Freakazoid, while it was a variety show just like the other ones, this show right here had an animation style and format similar to Batman the animated series in the DC animated universe, but it had the wacky comedic style of an Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, and Tiny Toons. Most people didn't get the humor, so it didn't last long. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. I'll be talking about more of those shows in a longer review of the Warner Brothers variety cartoons of the 90s and 2000s. Like I said um earlier, I am this was the cartoon. These cartoons were the cartoons I forgot about in the previous video. I did include Wabbit, the new Looney Tunes show, in the previous video, but I forgot to list these cartoons, and I'm mad at myself for doing that, because these were some of the greatest and were some of my favorite cartoons of the 90s decade. Number 2 and 3 were some of my other favorite cartoons of the 90s decade, and that was the two variety shows starring Space Ghost, the superhero from the Hanna-Barbera superhero from the 1960s and 80s. The first show was Space Coast, Coast to Coast, was a live-action late-night talk show which served as a precursor to the very popular and, in my opinion, overrated Adult Swim of today. But this show, Space Coast, Coast to Coast, was one of the greatest shows of all time. He recruited villains Zorak and Motar, who you can tell hate him, to help as producers for his show, while he interviews very popular guests. One of my all-time favorite childhood professional wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, made guest starred on one episode of this show. Then you had the other show, Cartoon Planet, which this show right here was even better than Space Coast, Coast to Coast. Unlike the late night adult themed talk show format that was Space Coast, Coast to Coast, this show right here was a was a weekday afternoon after school special, featuring, instead of Motar, featuring Space Coast, Zorak, and Brack, who has a brand new personality after an accident in the 1960s show, which makes it appears that Brack that Brack and his henchmen died, but instead it transformed him into the childish character we know today. They created Brack, one of the coolest and greatest characters ever. I still laugh at his hilarious sing-alongs, and I love the stock animation, which is just funny to laugh at nowadays. So yeah, can't wait to talk about these more in the future. Number 4 is Loud House. I already talked about this show in the previous video. One of the greatest shows of the modern era of today, and this show is still running. And in my opinion, this show saved, revived, and preserved Nickelodeon's dignity. Whenever Nickelodeon focuses on shows like this, animation, they're currently the best. They're currently the best network right now. I'm a Cartoon Network guy, but Nickelodeon is just owning them. Number 5 is the Alvin and the Chipmunks franchise. You have the 1980s series and the 2015 series. My opinion, Alvin and the Chipmunks, one of the best and underrated franchises of all time, because their comeback, they've been gone for a long time, but they finally came back in 2015. Let's start off with the 80s series. You have the Alvin and the Chipmunks. You have both shows. Both shows are pretty much the same except the 2015 show focuses on all of the 2010s problems like bullying and social media, and of course the 2015, as you can see by the picture here, they look more human, whereas the 80s versions look look like chipmunks, and the 80s has several popular guest stars. One of the most memorable for me being Mr. T, who guest starred on the 80s cartoon. Can't wait to talk about this franchise in the future. And I love the sing alongs in every episode. When I think cartoon characters singing, the Alvin and the Chipmunks are the first to come to mind. Number 6 is one of the most popular Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and of course, that is the comedy adventure fantasy cartoon The Smurfs. That's all I'm going to say about that. 7 is Fantastic Max, Hanna-Barbera's answer to the Rugrats. And this actually predated Rugrats by 2 years. This show, in my opinion, I love both shows, but this show was way cooler. But it didn't get the same fanfare as the did. and it was only canceled after 2 seasons. Fantastic Max features a boy named Max who, with the aid of his mechanical stuffed animal AB, gained the ability to talk and goes on various real intergalactic adventures, battling various monsters, aliens, etc., etc. Like I said, way better than Rugrats, the other show featuring babies. Number 8 is the hugely popular Steven Universe. I've been meaning to review this show for a long time, but I never got around to doing it because this show, unlike any other cartoon show on this list, this is the most complex comedy, adventure, fantasy based cartoon I've seen. This cartoon is like an anime, which sets it apart from all of the other cartoons. I think it just recently ended, but the remaining episodes haven't ended yet. But Steven Universe, one of the greatest shows of all time. Number 9, my opinion, one of the best and underrated shows of all time of the modern era, and that's Uncle Grandpa. Which, in my opinion, I felt this ended way too soon. This could have lasted longer, and could have been a SpongeBob, um, Hanna-Barbera Looney Tunes character of this generation, but it ended way too soon. While popular with kids, popular with critics, this was not popular with long-time Cartoon Network fans, and that's one of the reasons why the show didn't last as long as it was. But I thought this show was one of the most random, hilarious, drug-induced, acid-based cartoons I've seen. To make those drug-induced acid cartoons I just mentioned, you gotta be a genius and you gotta be a strong writer to make those work. And this show was just downright hilarious. I remember laughing at and enjoying the weirdness and oddness of this show. And the weirdness and oddness of this show separated it from the other cartoons at the time. The next show was Regular Show. Once again, the next 2 shows actually are Regular Show and Adventure Time. Once again, these shows, along with Steven Universe, Uncle Grandpa, these shows, in my opinion, saved and saved and once again preserved Cartoon Network's dignity. Cartoon Network, they totally ruined their reputation with that live action scene in real crap, and these four cartoons came in and saved these four cartoons came in and just saved the day and made Cartoon Network awesome for as long for while they were here. And Cartoon Network, while I have a couple of problems with them programming when they're airing something other than Teen Titans Go, are actually pretty good. But everything good about Cartoon Network is because of these four shows right here. You got regular show, which is anything but regular, Then you got Adventure Time, a show, I Adventure Time, which I've always liked, because it's a cross between the Legend of Zelda, Mad Max, and the Smurfs cartoon. It features Finn and his dog. It features Finn and his dog Jake going on various odd adventures in the mysterious post-apocalyptic fantastic world they live in. Yeah, that's it for the modern cartoons. Now we're going retro, and we're going to the action adventure based cartoons for a while now. And for the first three cartoons, the first four cartoons on this list are the video game based cartoons, and that of course is the Armor Chinese animated Canadian based cartoon Double Dragon. 13 is Street Fighter. 14, Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. And 15 is the Sonic cartoons. Sonic Underground, X, Boom, and 1994. I left out the other Sonic cartoons. I didn't think it was good enough to be on this list, but it is in the previous one. Yeah, let's talk about each of these cartoons. I've already talked about these cartoons a lot on my YouTube channels, and I will be talking about them more again. All, all, hold on, all seven of these cartoons are great, and in my opinion, not only are they some of the best video game based adaptations of all time, these cartoons right here was some of the best, in my opinion, greatest cartoons to ever happen in the 90s. And all of them, in my opinion, it ended way too soon, with only the Street Fighter cartoon got some real closure, got a real ending. And I will be talking more about these awesome cartoons. 16 is the 16 is the Marvel anthology of cartoons, because they have so many cartoons, so I call it the anthology. You have X-Men. Let's start off with the 90s Marvel animated universe. You have the very popular X-Men the animated series, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Avengers United. They stand one of the last cartoons they produced, the Silver Surfer, the Incredible Hulk, and of course Spider-Man the animated series, and its follow-up, Spider-Man Unlimited, the criminally underrated Spider-Man Unlimited. The 90s Marvel Universe is, in my opinion, one of the best, and in my opinion is the most iconic of the Marvel based cartoons. Then of course you have the most recent you have the most recent and current Marvel's universe, which consists of Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, its sequel follow-up Avengers Assemble, Ultimate Spider-Man, and Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man 2017, the closest and best adaptation of the Marvel comics were these cartoons right here. Then of course you have the 1980s Marvel animated universe, which consists of the Pride of X-Men single episode pilot, which is an adaptation of the 80s X-Men, um, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Spider-Man 1981, another Spider-Man cartoon set in the same universe without Iceman and Firestar, and RoboCop, the animated series. Left out Incredible Hulk, left out the 80s Hulks. I've never actually seen
the 1980s Hulk. Then you got the 2000s X-Men. You got the 2000s Marvel animated universe, which is not really an animated universe because none of these shows are in a universe with each other. Nor was the 80s versions, except for the Spider-Man cartoons. And that is, of course, is X-Men Evolution, awesome reimagining of the X-Men franchise while still staying close to what X-Men was about. Then you have the um Wolverine in the X-Men, which is an adaptation of the astonishing X-Men comic books and a hybrid of the 90s animated series and the 2000s X-Men Evolution. It's from the same creators of the 2000s X-Men Evolution. And of course, Fantastic Four 2006, or as they're called, World's Greatest Heroes. That's it for the Marvel cartoons right now. The next is the mutant based cartoons. Number 17 is the Toxic Crusaders, a comedic self-parody animated adaptation of the ultraviolet trauma horror superhero series, the Toxic Avenger. This cartoon, Toxic Crusaders, in my opinion, is one of the best in the franchise, and to this day I'm waiting for the live action adaptation of this hilariously awesome superhero cartoon, which was canceled way too soon. Toxic Crusaders were on their way to becoming popular, just like their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles predecessors, but the higher ups just canceled them after 13 episodes. So yeah, 18 is another underrated, obscure cartoon that I just recently encountered recently, but I've heard of the franchise this is loosely based on, and it was so awesome I've included in every cartoons list now, and that is the Stone Protectors, which is another adaptation of the very popular franchise. Trolls franchise, which I think started in the 50s and 60s with the tiny action figures. The Stone Protectors, one of the best mutant mutant superhero based cartoons in the 90s, in my opinion, even better than their other predecessors, their rivals, and that's of course is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I'm going to talk about later in this list. So yeah, the Stone Protectors shows off as like a weird hybrid between Trolls, Ninja Turtles, and Ninja Turtles, Street Fighter, and the Sailor Moon based franchise. I think the last two are unintentional. So yeah. 19 is the Street Sharks. Street Sharks, another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles clones, only with sharks, and this show was actually better. This show was actually better than, in my opinion, as a cartoon, as a Saturday morning cartoon, was better than the original 80s Ninja Turtles cartoon, but not story wise. The 80s cartoon had a much superior story. You had Street Sharks. Then one of the cooler things about this show had a spin off cartoon set in the same universe, set in space, called The Extreme Dinosaurs, which was also cool. Not gonna say much about that. I want to talk about both of these shows in a full length review. 20 is the Ninja Turtles franchise. First, you have the show that started it all, the 1980s TMNT series, the show that launched the Turtles into mainstream icons. Before this, they were an underground comic book that no one cared about. This was the show that launched them, the Turtles, into mainstream. They don't get a lot of credit for it, despite their popularity. They're hated on by fans of the Mirage comic books. But I think this right here is one of the best versions of the Ninja Turtles. The next is the 2007 series, which is actually the 2003 series, but the 2003 to 2000 the 2003 portion, which is the first 3 seasons of Ninja Turtles, I happen to not like. The first season was terrible. The second 2 were okay. I'll talk more about that in a rant. But around 2007, when they released the CGI film TMNT, they later aired in 2008. They aired a season called Back to the Sewer, which was used to end the series, and they had that series. Imitate the look, adapt a similar look and animation style similar to that CGI film, and I thought that was one of the best seasons, with 4 through 7 being the best of this series. So I call it the 2007 series. That's why I call it that. So yeah. And last but not least, the 2012 series, in my opinion, probably the greatest, actually not probably, one of the greatest Ninja Turtles adaptations of all time. So sad that it's ended. It's way better than the current Ninja Turtles cartoon on now, which is terrible, but it's harmless and entertaining to watch. So yeah, that's the Ninja Turtles franchise, one of the greatest franchises ever, because it inspired so many popular clones, which I thought were actually superior franchises to them, but they just weren't as popular as this right here. 21, 21, 21 and 22, two of Cartoon Network's most newest and most recent shows. The first one was an internet-based cartoon that was so popular it became a full-length series, and that is Mighty Magosaurs, which is an American comedic um, parody of Japanese anime cartoons of the 60s, 80s, and 90s. Because one of the animes they parody that their plot is actually loosely inspired by is the very popular anime. I haven't seen it, but I've heard good things about it, and that's Slayers. 22 is OK KO Let's Be Heroes, another Japanese anime inspired cartoon vastly similar to Dragon Ball, One Punch Man, Street Fighter, and of course Sonic the Hedgehog and Naruto. Yeah, it's about a little kid named KO who goes on various adventures trying to become the ultimate hero. I want to talk more about that in a longer review. Um, 23. 23 is the DC animation anthology, which consists of the Super Friends cartoons. I like all of them, with the best being the Challenge of the Super Friends, the most popular one. The World's Greatest Super Friends, a fantasy version of the Super Friends, and of course the last two seasons where the show got really serious, and that of course is Super Friends, the legendary superpowers show. So yeah, Super Friends, and still entertaining today despite all the flaws, such as the lack of killing and the lack of actual fighting, the lack of hand-to-hand combat fighting in the show. So yeah, next is the very popular and the most iconic adaptations of the DC universe, and that is the DC animated universe, consisting of Batman the animated sequel, and its sequel and follow-ups, the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, and New Adventures of Batman and Robin, and of course Batman Beyond. Batman Beyond. You also had the best, in my opinion, Justice League 2001 and its sequel, Justice League Unlimited, which was used to end the DC animated universe. But the influence of this very popular series that aired from the 90s and 2000s is still seen in cartoons, in DC animated movies of today, and even and in some of the other adaptations in the 2000s DC animated universe, which is not really an animated universe because none of these shows are in a universe with each other. That's of course is the very popular and underrated Legion of Superheroes cartoon, awesome adaptation of a very popular and underrated comic book. They're the original and real Teen Titans. I hate Teen Titans Go. This is the Teen Titans. The 2003 Teen Titans series aired from 2003 to 2006 and was canceled for various reasons despite its popularity. But this right here, one of the greatest DC cartoons ever, and the best adaptation of the 1980s Teen Titans comic book. Next is the criminally underrated Batman Brave and the Bold. Has a mixed reception amongst fans, but I like this Batman because despite the campiness, doesn't shy away from darkness, and it encompasses all eras of Batman, while mostly focusing on the very popular DC Brave and the Bold series, where they pair various heroes up together on various adventures. Next is the most recent cartoon, which aired in 2016 or 17, Justice League Action, which this encompasses all eras of the DC universe. It has the animation and action of the modern 90s and 2000s DC animated cartoons, and it has the format of the classic of the of the classic Super Friends cartoon and the Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon, because this also features various superheroes paired together in various adventures. So yeah, Justice League Action, and so far the show I think is either canceled or on hiatus. I think it's on hiatus. I don't know for sure. Next is the hugely popular cult classic Young Justice, which was canceled way too soon. The cancellation of this show actually turned me off the Cartoon Network. Turned me off the Cartoon Network. One of the greatest shows of all time, and one of the best DC, probably the best DC cartoon they've ever made, and most complex DC cartoon they ever made. It starts off simple, but then it just becomes convoluted towards the it becomes convoluted and just hard to follow towards the end. But one of the greatest DC cartoons of all time. The cancellation of this show and the next two shows and the next show on this list turned me off the Cartoon Network, and that is Green Lantern 2011. Green Lantern, in my opinion, is one of the best superheroes and the best comic books DC has ever produced. And I couldn't wait till he had his own movie, which I love, but didn't do too well at the box office, and his own cartoon, which was probably even better than the movie. And this cartoon did not disappoint. One of the best, not memorable, but one of the best cartoons of all time. Not as memorable as some of the other cartoons on this list, but a really awesome cartoon that was canceled way too soon. Right when this was getting real good, they pulled the plug on this cartoon. And this right here and the cancellation of Young Justice completely turned me off the Cartoon Network for a year. Next is next is next is Beware the Batman. This cartoon is interesting because I started following this cartoon towards the end of its run when it was canceled. I was so mad at Young Justice and the Green Lantern shows leaving Cartoon Network that I took it out on this show and Teen Titans Go. But I missed out on Beware the Batman, an awesome CGI animated Batman cartoon that had lots of popular DC characters like Metamorpho, and many more. But yeah, this is a cartoon I became a fan of towards the end of its run. I actually missed out on it because I took out Green Lantern and Young Justice being canceled on this show right here. And last but not least is the 2004 The Batman series, which is a complete reimagining of the Batman franchise. All of the other ones in some ways borrow and follow things from the comic books. This right here was a completely reimagined Chinese anime style Batman. A Batman series vastly similar to the Jackie Chan Adventures cartoon, which it featured the same creator, Jeff Matsuda, something like that. So yeah, awesome reimagining of the Batman cartoon. 24, the Ben 10 franchise. You have Ben 10, Alien Force, and Ultimate Alien, the best, and the prequel that started it all, which a lot of people consider this the best, and that is Ben 10 2006. I thought Alien Force and Ultimate Alien were the best. I like the older, much more mature Ben, Gwen, and Kevin as a hero. So yeah, 25, the Thundercats franchise. Thundercats 2011 and 1985. I'm actually looking forward to the 2019 based cartoon, which so far has a completely negative reception. But yeah, can't wait to talk about Thundercats again. 26 is the He-Man franchise. You have the 1990s He-Man. You have the 1990s He-Man, one of the best. The criminally underrated 2002 series, widely considered the best He-Man cartoon. You have the female She-Ra cartoon, which was even good and a vast improvement over the 1980s He-Man cartoon, and the cartoon that started it all, the 1980s He-Man cartoon, which wasn't the best cartoon, but it was an awesome 80s It was one of the best, in my opinion, in the 80s, and it's the most popular He-Man cartoon today, surviving and lot longer than any of the other He-Mans on this list. But I think the other three are much better. But this right here was an awesome. This right here was an awesome cartoon. Um, 27 is Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, another underrated 80s cartoon that was canceled way too soon. The 27 episode is an audio production, wasn't even animated, which I still haven't watched yet. 28 is the very popular Highlander animated series, which I heard about in 2006 and finally got to see it recently, and show is awesome. Show is awesome. 29, Stargate Infinity. A huge fan of the live action Stargates SG-1 and its follow up Atlantis and the movie, and this right here, Infinity, is probably the best of the franchise. Heard about it in 2006. Finally got to see it in finally got to see it in finally got to see it recently. Even though I think I heard about it in the early 2000s when it was on the Fox box. Yeah. 30 is the Transformers franchise. First, we got the best and underrated Unicron trilogy. Doesn't get as much fanfare as the Generation 1 Transformers, but I think this was the best Transformers universe with Armada, Energon, and Cybertron, with Armada and Energon being the best and Cybertron being the worst, but it's an awesome trilogy. You got Prime. You got Prime, probably the best Transformers series of all time. You got G1, my opinion, overrated, not the best Transformers series around, but awesome, especially around season 2 and 3, which is the movie and the rest of the series, where the show really became good. Then you have the hugely popular Beast Wars. I even like its poorly received sequel Beast Machines. Then of course you got animated, a great Canadian based cartoon. Even though I can't stand the designs of the humans. Then you have Robots in Disguise 2001. Not the best Transformers, but one of the best animated Transformers cartoons I've seen. It's a hybrid of Transformers and Digimon. And 31 is the Mega Man franchise. Mega Man franchise. You have the hugely popular, which has a mixed reception. Some people like it, some people don't. The hugely popular Mega Man 1994 cartoon, which is a superhero adaptation of the video games, a loose adaptation of the video games. You have NT Warrior, which is a new um, Pokemon, Beyblade, Digimon style Mega Man cartoon. Wasn't the best cartoon, but I was a huge anime fan at the time, man. I'm still am now, and I still enjoy this cartoon now. Then you have Mega Man Star Force, alongside the 90s cartoon, in my opinion, one of the best Mega Man cartoons around. Is based on the um, the Game Boy Advance Mega Man series. Then of course you have Mega Man 2018, the newest and current Mega Man series. A little too comical, but an awesome adaptation of Mega Man. I like how it goes back to the original design of Mega Man, even though I much prefer the 90s design of Mega Man. So yeah, but yeah, I'll talk more about the Mega Man franchise in another video. 32 is an obscure cartoon called Sky Surfer Strike Force, which is a hybrid of the Double Dragon, Street Fighter, Mega Man, and Power Ranger based television series. 33 is another sci-fi show called Bionic 6. 34 is another science fiction human transformer like show called Hanna-Barbera show called The Centurions. That's it for the action for a while. Now we go back to the comedy. And first we start off with Disney. And the first 5 cartoons I want to start off with are Toon Disney and Disney's One Saturday Morning. The first one, as you can see by the picture here, is one of my opinion, one of the best and most underrated shows they have. That's Lloyd in Space. Then you have The Weekenders, which was vastly similar to the Lloyd in Space show, but it takes place over the weekend. Over the weekend. Then you had Recess, which was vastly similar to both of those shows, even sharing the same voice actors from Lloyd in Space. Recess, a show that completely takes place on the playground. The longest running show on Disney Channel. This show was reran on Disney Channel more than any other show. 38, in my opinion, is a hugely popular and hugely awesome House of Mouse cartoon, which really deserves more airtime and really was canceled way too soon. 39, Toon Disney. 39 is Goof Troop from Toon Disney. That's it for Disney at the moment. 40 is of course 40 is of course Nickelodeon. First you got Doug, one of the best cartoons around, because while some people today will criticize this show for being bland, you know why I like the show. But I also like the show because in comparison to all the other shows on this list and all the other shows that were out at the time, this was the 90s, so every show was like raunchy. This show was basic. Kinda 80s, like, even though it was in the 90s, and that made it stood out. Then you have the cult urban street classic Hey Arnold. Then you have Rugrats, which was good. Then you have, in my opinion, this underrated sequel, All Grown Up, which a lot of people don't like, but I did because the baby stuff kind of got annoying. 43 is Monsters versus Aliens. Never saw the movie, but I love the television series. Canceled way too soon, in my opinion. 44, Gravity Falls, one of the many modern shows, one of the many modern great Disney shows that's kept and has preserved Disney's legacy and credibility, and one of the shows that brought Disney back. It's recently canceled. It's recently canceled in reruns now, but one of the many good shows during the 2012 to 2017 era of Disney Channel, which was absolute 2016 era Disney Channel, which was absolutely atrocious. 45 is a new cartoon that I just actually added to this list, but I had to add it, and that's Trolls: The Beat Goes On, a sequel to the hugely popular 2016 DreamWorks animated picture Trolls, which I just recently saw and loved. You'll hear about that in my best movies ever, in my favorite films. 46 is another new cartoon that airs on Boomerang called Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, a adaptation and sequel to the Wizard of Oz film. 48 is another show is another classic Canadian show called Reboot, with the video game based reboot cartoon that was one of the earliest shows on Toonami back in the 90s, and one of the best Canadian shows of all time. 49 is the Tom and Jerry franchise. The modern Tom and Jerry franchise. Just like with Looney Tunes, I enjoy the Tom and Jerry shorts, but I've never been a super fan of the Tom and Jerry franchise. I am, however, a fan of most of their modern adaptations, and that is the 2007 Tom and Jerry Tales, the 90s Tom and Jerry Kids, which was awesome, and the 2014 Tom and Jerry based cartoon. 50 is the 1970s Hanna-Barbera Wacky Races cartoon, and its brand new reboot Wacky Races 2015, which is even bigger and better than the 70s Wacky Races cartoons. Well, this was my top 50 best cartoons. This was my top 50 best cartoons list. Once again, I talked longer than I wanted to, but I like this video much better than the other one. Alright, I'm finished for now. Turn the video off right now if you don't want to hear the rest of the song. With that being said, I'm done.
doesn't